I was born and raised in central Ohio, and once a year we try to come back to visit. I have 7 boys, believe it or not, and 2 of them still live in Ohio, so once a year we try to come up to visit them and their children. My dad lived here for many, many years. Unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago. And we're in the process now of cleaning out the barn where he had his workshop. My dad was a pack rat. There are all sorts of things in there that we're trying to sort through and trying to decide if they have any value, if they're worth keeping, or if we should junk them or try to sell them. But one of those items was this workbench right here. And my son decided that he wanted Grandpa's workbench because that's where Grandpa had spent most of his time building projects. And I want to talk a little bit about this bench and how it was built and what my dad did with it. So I'm going to take the camera, I'm going to walk around a little bit and show some of the features. It's nothing spectacular. It's something my dad probably put together in a weekend, but it served him for many, many years. And that brings me to the point I want to bring up is that sometimes I think that we go overboard in overthinking our workbenches. You know, they have to be a certain style, they have to be full of dog holes, or sometimes people want to put T-tracks in them for clamps, and those are all great and I appreciate those. But sometimes all you really need is a simple work surface and a place to assemble your project. So this bench served that purpose very well for my dad for a lot of years. My dad basically built this bench out of 2x4s, and I think he used 4x4s for the corner legs. It's assembled with lag bolts and carriage bolts, and knowing my dad, it was assembled in such a way that it was never meant to be disassembled. When we went to move it, we had to figure out a way to move the whole thing in its entirety without taking it apart, and that was certainly a challenge. My dad incorporated 2x6 rails, and he installed 2 drawers on each side of the workbench. One feature my dad added to one of the drawers was this hidden area in the back. It's only accessible if you pull the drawer completely out of the opening. I'm not sure what he stored there. Since he was in a rural area and on a farm, maybe he stored a pistol there to keep gophers and groundhogs at bay. But in any case, I thought it was a unique feature of this workbench. My dad did put casters on here. They are a little small for my taste. Putting a bench on casters can be problematic if you do a lot of handwork, but my dad was mostly a power tool user, and he used this bench mostly for project assembly, so it was easy for him to move around if he needed to. So the bench construction is basically 2x4s with 4x4 legs, and I believe he used 2 layers of 3/4 inch plywood for the top and then applied plastic laminate on top of that. My dad was into collecting old tools and old woodworking vices, but you'll notice that the bench has no dog holes, and that's something we may want to include or add at some point in the future. One of the vices my dad restored was this machinist vise. My son decided it'd be a good idea to take it as well, because he really doesn't have one. My son's not really a woodworker, but I hope to turn him into one. So this machinist vise will probably go on one corner of this bench at some point as well. One interesting feature of this bench that my dad used was a piece of carpet or a runner on top of the bench. He used that for assembling projects to keep from scratching or marring the parts. And also, a piece of carpet on your workbench can help keep screws and nails and other small pieces of hardware from rolling off the bench. I think it was brilliant. Down below, my dad simply added an OSB shelf. Nothing fancy there, but he stored a lot of his power tools and cases and stuff like that down below. So overall, I think this workbench is going to be a good addition for my son. I intend to show him how to use it for woodworking and maybe make some improvements to it to make it even more useful in the future.